Among all the obsolescent aircraft which inevitably equipped the warring nations at the outbreak of the Second World War, the Gloster Gladiator stands proud as the ultimate perfection of a bygone age. It was invested with responsibilities far beyond those that his technical capacity hoped to fulfill. Its operational record and the courage of its pilots in combat certainly helped to strengthen the myth of the Royal Air Force. By 1930, the British Air Ministry became interested in the development of a new aircraft capable of reaching at least a speed of 400 km per hour, highly maneuverable, and armed with no less than 4 machine guns. By private development initiative, Gloster Aircraft Company built a prototype with the designation Gloster SS-37. Although it was questioned as being considered little more than a step ahead of its predecessor, the Gloster Gauntlet, the Air Ministry ordered a batch of 23 aircraft, and the 1st of July, the aircraft was officially designated as Gladiator. This first production version of the Gloster Gladiator, called Mark I, had an all-metal airframe with a fabric covering. It was powered by a Bristol Mercury 9 air-cooled radial piston engine, which turned a 2-bladed fixed-pitch wooden propeller. It featured a fully enclosed cockpit, and was armed with two 7.7mm Vickers Mark V machine guns mounted in the fuselage, and two Lewis machine guns mounted beneath the lower wings. Expanding British interests in the Middle East meant there was a requirement for more fighters. The need to make them more suitable for operations in hot, humid and dusty conditions made the Air Ministry issued new specifications to cover late production Gladiator Mark I, and the introduction of the Gladiator Mark II. For this version, a new Bristol Mercury 8A engine was one major change, which turned a 3-bladed propeller. Gloster also decided to fit a more advanced cockpit instrumentation, including an electric engine start. Gladiators used in the Middle East were also fitted with a bracket just behind the cockpit holding a small water container and emergency desert rations. By 1937, the British Fleet Air Arm did not have a suitable fighter with which to protect its aircraft carriers. The urgent need to start the training of new fighter squadrons prompted the Gladiator to be selected for shipboard service. The first batch destined for the British fleet were 38 recently completed Gladiator Mark IIs, which were retained at the factory for modification to the first Sea Gladiator standard, in 1938. The main modifications included a fuselage that incorporated a anchoring of, V-shaped arrestor hook at the junction. Also, the airspeed indicator was recalibrated from miles per hour to knots. The 801 Squadron was the British Fleet first operational Sea Gladiator unit, and flew their aircraft aboard the carrier HMS Courageous in May of 1939, only 4 months before the outbreak of the Second World War. The Gloster Gladiator in its Mark II version had the following technical details. A length of 8.4 meters, a wingspan of 9.8 meters, and a height of 3.6 meters. Power was provided by a Bristol Mercury 8A supercharged 9-cylinder, air-cooled radial engine, that generated near 830 horsepower. This engine turned a 3-bladed Fairy Reed fixed-pitch metal propeller, capable of delivering a maximum speed of 413 km per hour, at an altitude of 4,400 meters. The Gladiator had an operational range of 680 kilometers, and had a service ceiling of 10,210 meters. The armament was 4 fixed M1919 Browning machine guns. 2 fuselage mounted for synchronized firing through the air screw with 600 rounds per gun. And 1 blister mounted beneath each lower wing with 400 rounds per gun. The first Gloster Gladiators to enter combat were Gladiators Mark I, ordered by the Chinese central government, during the height of the Sino-Japanese War, in October 1937. The first 20 aircraft were delivered in 2 crated batches to Hong Kong in November, but due to Japanese diplomatic pressure, the crated aircraft were moved by rail to Guangzhou, where they were finally assembled. The Gladiators were quickly assigned to the 5th Fighter Group of the new Chinese Nationalist Air Force. After testing, the aircraft were moved inland out of range of marauding Japanese aircraft for a spell of pilot training, during which time the inexperienced Chinese pilots wrote off several machines. The 17th Fighter Squadron received 4 Gladiators to fly alongside Polikarpov I-15s from Hankou and Xi'an. 16 aircraft each were assigned to the 28th and 29th Fighter Squadrons for operations from Changsha and Nanchang. By early February 1938, the fighters were ready for operations and proved a useful addition to the Chinese Nationalist Air Force. The most successful Chinese Gladiator pilot was the Chinese-American Captain Arthur Chin, of the 28th Fighter Squadron, who between 1938 and 1939 claimed 6.5 victories on the Gladiator. He was badly burned during his final combat, and after treatment in Hong Kong, eventually escaped to the United States. Chinese Gladiators scored several more victories over Japanese aircraft, but when the Mitsubishi A6M0 entered the theater, the Chinese Gladiators' days were numbered. The RAF had 8 fighter squadrons, operating 114 Gladiators, when Britain declared war on Germany, on September 3, 1939. 2 Gladiator squadrons, 607th and 615th Squadrons, were flown to France, on November 1939. On May 10, 1940, when the Germans invaded the Low Countries, the Gladiators were quickly in action, with 607th Squadron claiming 7 enemy machines before breakfast. Between 10th and 20th of May, 607th Squadron claimed 72 German aircraft, with another 56 damaged. Unfortunately, both squadrons' records for this period were lost in the withdrawal from France. On May 18, Gladiators clashed with Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Bf-110 fighters over Arras, with some of the enemy reportedly being shot down. During the afternoon, and while most of the Gladiators were on the ground refueling, the Luftwaffe bombed the airfield. Most of the aircraft were destroyed. On April 8, 1940, Germany launched an offensive on Denmark and Norway, Operation Vise-Rubung, in an attempt to secure its northern flank and protect its access to the Swedish Iron through the port of Narvik. The German invasion of Norway met its most serious resistance at Oslo, where 7 operational Gladiators of the Norwegian fighter flight, based at the airport of Fornebu, would shoot down 5 German aircraft. However, 1 Gladiator would be shot down, and 2 others destroyed on the ground while refueling. In aid of Norwegian forces, British 263rd Squadron arrived on April 24, and first operated from an improvised landing strip built in Uppland. The day after their deployment, 2 Gladiators from the squadron would shoot down a Heinkel HE-115 seaplane. However, this action attracted the attention of the Luftwaffe, sending 3 Heinkel HE-111 to bomb the landing strip. The raid destroyed 4 Gladiators and wounded 3 pilots. Further patrols that day resulted in 3 HE-111s shot down, but later German attacks left only 4 Gladiators at day's end. The squadron was evacuated to Great Britain, being re-equipped with 18 more Gladiators Mark II. On May 21, it was redispatched to Norway, establishing its new base near Narvik. Multiple German aircraft were shot down by Gladiators in the early days of their deployment. Claiming a total of 23 enemy aircraft destroyed, and another 5 damaged, the squadron would be evacuated again on June 7, 1940. His 10 surviving Gladiators landed on HMS Glorious. Unfortunately, the next day the carrier was intercepted by the German battleships Gneisenau and Scharnhorst, and sunk. All 10 Gladiator pilots were among the 1,519 men lost with the carrier. In the Mediterranean front, the Gladiators of the 33rd Squadron, based in Egypt, obtained excellent records when facing the Italians in North Africa. The squadron was assigned missions in the area near Sidi Barrani, from where engaged Italian forces operating from its bases in Libya, shooting down a total of 38 aircraft, and destroying another 20 on the ground, during the first 6 weeks since Italy entered the war. On August 4, the South African-born fighter pilot, Marmaduke Pat Patel, claimed his first victories, shooting down a Bradar BA-65, and a Fiat CR-42 Escort. Pat would become the greatest ace flying a Gladiator during the war, scoring 15 confirmed kills, while flying a Gladiator. The focus of the war in the Mediterranean then switched to Greece, after the Italians invaded the country on October 1940. The British sent 2 Gladiator squadrons, 80th and 11th Squadrons, from Egypt to help their new allies. Once again, the Gladiators proved themselves to be well able to cope with the Italian aircraft they faced. 80th Squadron downed approximately 40 Italian aircraft by the end of December, for the loss of 6 Gladiators. Rommel's threatened invasion of Egypt forced the RAF to pull its pilots out of Greece. But the Gladiator aircraft were given to the Greek Air Force. However, in April 1941, the Germans invaded Greece, and all of the surviving Gladiators were destroyed on the ground in a German air raid. Perhaps, the Gladiator's most famous exploits came on Malta. By the time Italy declared war on June 10, 1940, the only fighters based on the island were 6 Sea Gladiators, scrounged from the Navy. 7 pilots, with varying degrees of flying experience, joined what was euphemistically titled, the Halfar Fighter Flight. Only 1 pilot had any real experience flying Gladiators. The Italian Regia Aeronautica began its raids on Malta on June 11, seeking to subdue the island and ensure supply to its forces in North Africa. Thus, for 10 days in a row, the Sea Gladiators represented the island's sole air defense. Nevertheless, the Gladiators managed to shoot down several Italian bombers, despite being slower than them. The number of airworthy Gladiators fluctuated as the stress of constant flying. Also, there was no aircraft equipment standardization. If it could be made to fly, it was used. However, the commitment of the Halfar fighter flight pilots made it possible to maintain an almost constant air patrol over the island. When possible, the Gladiators were used in a flight of 3 aircraft, the standard RAF fighter formation of the time. It was these flights, of 3, that gained the aircraft the unofficial names of Faith, Hope, and Charity. These were never officially approved names, and the same 3 aircraft rarely flew together for long. Success at Malta eventually played a major Allied role in subsequent victories across North Africa, earning the small island nation the title of unsinkable aircraft carrier by British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. The total production of the Gloster Gladiator, in all its variants, amounts to 747 aircraft. All units were manufactured by the Gloster Aircraft Company, at its Hucklecote factory. The aircraft production report, for each version, corresponds to 1 SS-37, prototype aircraft. 378 Gladiator Mark I aircraft, including the requests of Latvia, with 26 units, Lithuania, 14 units, Sweden, 37 units, Belgium, 22 units, China, 36 units, Ireland, 4 units, and Greece, with 2 units. 270 Gladiator Mark II aircraft, including the request of Sweden, with 22 units, Portugal, 15 units, and Norway, with 6 units. And finally, 98 Sea Gladiator aircraft. The Gloster Gladiator ended its RAF life in a meteorological role, during 1944. After the first phases of the war, all the Gladiators were relegated to second-line duties. The Gladiator was the last biplane design fighter manufactured for, and used by, the RAF. Subsequently, multiple countries acquired retired RAF Gladiators, such as Iraq, Egypt, Finland, and South Africa. The last Gladiator, this in Portuguese service, was retired in 1953. Gloster's private venture development of the Gladiator brought the biplane fighter concept to the peak of technical perfection. In many air arms, it smoothed the transition to advanced monoplane fighters. Gladiators, and Sea Gladiators, fought on almost every front during the first 2 years of the war. Like a gallant old soldier, the Gladiator bravely faced the demands to which it was subjected on the front line, even in the face of opponents far superior to its technical characteristics. However, in those instances, the skill and ability of its pilots were decisive to equalize opportunities, and even to tilt them in favor of the biplane.